My name is Hannah Hartley, and I'm one of the project teams supporting Without Walls, the UK's largest consortium of outdoor arts festivals dedicated to commissioning and touring new outdoor work and supporting the ambition of artists. I'm very pleased to welcome you to the second of our sessions today, and just wanted to say hello to anyone who is just joining us. This virtual symposium is organised in partnership between Without Walls and Wild Rumpus and forms part of the Without Walls Creative Lab programme, a series of creative laboratories designed to allow for in-depth examination of identified sector topics. The outcomes and learning from each laboratory will be documented and shared with all Without Walls partners and the wider sector. We received more than 170 registrations from 10 countries for today's symposium, and it's really great to see that so many of you are watching right now. Just before we proceed, I would like to run through a few practicalities. Each of our panels today feature a range of speaker presentations and will be followed by a chaired discussion with our presenting speakers. All of today's programme will take place in Hopin. Presentations will be broadcast here on the stage, and follow-on discussions will take place in sessions, which you can find by following the link on the left-hand menu. Today's programme will run until 5:50 p.m. UK time. This session will run until 2:45 UK time, which is 1 hour and 45 minutes in total, including a 15-minute break between the presentations and follow-up discussion. The schedule includes several screen breaks for your comfort. During these, the live stream will be paused, but the event will remain open for you to continue interacting through the chat function. We are recording all of today's programme, and these will be made available online following the symposium. You'll see two chat boxes. Please use the event chat to say hello, who you are and where you're from, so that other participants can see who is present. You're encouraged to submit questions for the panellists in the stage chat. I will be monitoring this throughout the presentations and will aim to pose as many of your questions as we can to our speakers during the follow-on discussions. Feel free to comment, post and tweet about this event using the hashtag #CreativeLab, and make sure to follow Without Walls and Wild Rumpus on social media, as we'll be sharing follow-up content and resources. Finally, for access purposes and for any viewers for whom English is not their first language, we're providing live captioning and BSL throughout the day. To follow the captions, simply visit the link we have shared in the event chat. So without any further ado, I would now like to ask Mark Denby, the Head of Production and Programme for Norfolk and Norwich Festival and Without Walls board member, to join the stage and introduce this session. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Hannah, and welcome everybody to this session. Over the next 45 minutes or so, we're going to be talking about the physical practicalities of committing to sustainable productions. This session offers up tangible case histories, showcasing inspiring examples of how to make more sustainable choices from a logistical and material perspective. Shortly, we're going to be joined by Pip Rush, co-founder and creative director at Arcadia, who will talk to you about his experience of building with scrap responsibly and wrestling with environmental challenges and justification of worldwide touring, sourcing and building. Following that, we'll then have some insight from Pete Gunson, co-artistic director of Piff Path Theatre, who will be presenting the set of his new show in development, Toast, as a case study to explore his approach to design and delivery from a sustainable perspective. First, though, I've been asked just to share some of my own experiences in this area. As Hannah mentioned, I'm head of production at Norfolk and Norwich Festival here in Norwich, where I am. Norfolk and Norwich Festival is a 17-day-long annual multi-arts festival taking place in Norwich, but also across Norfolk, for an audience of around 100,000 people each year. We do lots of indoor work and use other people's venues, but we also have quite a significant outdoor programme where we're in control of environmental related issues there. I should also mention that I am the environmental champion for the board of Without Walls as well. Now I'm just going to try and share my screen, so I have some images to share with you. So Hopefully you can all see that. So last year, I did a piece of work with the 2019 commissioned Touring Without Walls companies to try and create a picture of what the challenges were facing those companies in creating and touring sustainable productions. Each company, of course, varies in size and its art form, but there were commonalities that were really quick to appear. Artists need materials to make things: props, costumes, set. They use electronics and effects, and they need to be able to move these materials and themselves around in order to be able to present their work. They need to work to a budget. They often have tight deadlines, plus the added pressure of presenting a new work to an audience. It can sometimes be difficult for artists to put environmental sustainability at the top of their agenda, but it became apparent that if environmental considerations were not considered from the start of a creation process, that it becomes a very difficult thing to retrofit to a project later on. I found it really encouraging to see that many of the companies thought about environmental sustainability in a holistic manner. And what I mean by that is that they're considering the economic, the environmental, and the social impacts of their choices all together and not separately. The image here is Motion House Dance presenting their show Wild at Norfolk and Norwich Festival in 2019. And I spent a little bit more time with Motion House, and I found that they'd invested in modular equipment for many of their sets. So you can see the set here on the right is the one that was just in the previous image, and it's made in a way that also means it can be changed to make other sets for other shows. Indeed, Block, which is one of Motion House's most regularly booked shows, has got two sets, one that tours the UK and one that tours the rest of the world slowly. It moves from A to B to C rather than constantly going out and then coming back and then going out and coming back again. Another company I talked to were Kapow Dance, who are based in Manchester, and they've adapted the set of one of their shows so that it can tour on public transport. Here they are. And the company travelled to Swansea last year, taking their set with them by train, and they plan to create much more work that can travel this way in the future. Now, of course, public transport isn't always an option for touring companies, and Kapow had a few discussions with train managers as to the amount of equipment they were trying to fit on there, and were avoiding rush hour trains and busy services. So it doesn't always work for everybody, but I'd encourage anyone creating work to really consider the materials that they're using and ask themselves if any of these materials can be sourced locally by a presenter, rather than automatically thinking that it's something that needs to be moved around with the show all the time. So when I think about environmental things and I think about the work we do at the festival and the work we do with companies, I always come back to communication being really at the core of the process here. What I mean by communication isn't just how we talk to audiences, it's also how we talk within our organizations. And that might, you might be an organization of 1 or 2 or 20 or 50. We need to keep talking about environmental considerations in order to get things moving. So I was trying to encourage companies to create a green rider to accompany technical riders. I think this can be a great way for companies to spell out what they expect from presenters. So as a festival organizer, we get hospitality riders, we get information about travel and accommodation, and we get technical information in order to present work. But we would love to see green riders from companies, and this can be a way for you to spell out what you expect from us. For example, you could say that you don't want water in single-use plastic bottles. You want to use cutlery and crockery. You want locally sourced products, right through to expectations around how we're generating power for outdoor arts. We need to share and communicate our experiences of all of this and set targets. We need to be able to measure and understand and monitor the impact of our work for us to have a basis and the evidence for us to be able to move all of this work forward. A lot of people, I mean, I did this myself at the start, you're passionate about it, but actually you need to use real evidence and science to be able to do it effectively. If you don't already have one, I think it would be a great idea to consider creating an environmental policy to outline your principles and an action plan to lay out how you're going to get there. If you work with a designer, for example, you could give them a green brief and challenge them to find more sustainable ways to create and to be able to tour your work. And think about the circular economy and work towards it. A linear economy is one where we acquire material, and quite often that is new. We use it once, and then it's often disposed of. But that material likely has many more uses than that. But this is often the way that we behave. A recycling economy in the middle there takes the material, uses it for that single purpose, and then recycles it to be used for something else. So this is better, but it still takes an awful lot of energy to turn something back into something else. And over time, the quality will degrade and it will eventually also end up being disposed of. The circular economy, the one that we believe we should be working towards, considers that material before it's used, during its use, and after its use. So it doesn't need to be recycled and it doesn't get disposed of. As we live in a world of finite materials, we need to really consider this every step of the way. There's more detail and other resources and links available in the report that I published for Without Walls last year, which is available to download from the Without Walls website. And then finally, just a little bit on us at Norfolk and Norwich Festival ourselves. This is an image of our one of our main outdoor events, which is a weekend of family-based outdoor work, which happens in a park in the middle of the city in Norwich. So over the years, we've taken a number of steps to reduce our impact on our outdoor presentations. We've got drinking water, finally, into the park, which is available for artists, crew, and audiences on site. So we've effectively eliminated the use of the need of all those single-use plastic water bottles that we used to ferry into the park without even really thinking about it only a small number of years ago. We've also, hand in hand with that, banned our caterers on site from selling water altogether, and that started as asking them not to sell single-use plastic water bottles because we didn't believe that we needed them in the park, but they quickly switched to cans of drinking water instead. So we've had interesting discussions with our caterers, but we're now in a really good place. And also we're operating inside a city centre here, not a greenfield site. So if people want to, it's only a short journey into town to get other things if they so wish. And we've also, with our caterers, we've introduced a green bond with them. So we set out a series of standards for our caterers, and we hold a deposit from them so that to really encourage them to stick by that. One of the most successful things that we've introduced in recent years into our events outside is a green team of volunteers, and these are people who interact with our audiences and have a conversation with them about what we're doing and why we think it's important. This has been particularly successful when asking audiences, for example, to put certain waste into certain bins. It's definitely more effective than putting signage up, and the conversation, this is what a lot of I took from the sessions earlier this morning, was creating the space for the conversation is one of the most important things that we can do when we're thinking about outdoor work. So finally, Norfolk and Norwich Festival has been selected to be in the second cohort of the Julie's Bicycle Arts Council England funded accelerator programme, which I'm very excited about. Pitched the idea of introducing hard power, so permanent power into this park in the city. The park isn't just used by us, it's used by other organisations, and in total has 25 to 30 active event days every year in the park. So we wanted to use stop the use of fossil fuel generated power in the park for ourselves, but also we're working across the other partners to try and eliminate that altogether. And we're doing this alongside Norwich City Council, who've been brilliant and are really supportive and want this to happen as well. The Accelerator programme will support me to do this and also help us to create all the important messaging and communications around this. And we'll work to create a template for other cities to follow to understand the steps we took to take such a positive change in powering cultural events in the city. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And there we are. So now I would like to introduce Pip Rush. Pip is the creative director of Arcadia Spectacular, the groundbreaking UK events company behind iconic installations like the 50-ton fire-breathing spider and large and immersive shows like Metamorphosis. Driven by Pip's creative vision, Arcadia have won multiple awards and toured shows on 4 continents as their signature fusion of conscious ideas, sculpture, engineering, dance music, circus and cutting-edge technology continues to evolve. Over to you, Pip.
Thanks, Mark. Hello, everybody. Yeah, so I've been thinking a bit about how to approach today, and I think one of the things that is for sure with the environmental situation is it's not really worth telling people what to do, and especially it's not really worth telling artists what to do. So I felt that the best thing today was just to talk you through a bit of our journey, how we came to do what we do, some of the challenges we've had and some of the ideas we've had. Hopefully there'll be a bit of inspiration, and if not, at least it might help you see that we are kind of just making it up as we go along, as much as I expect you are, because it's a very complicated subject. For me personally, I grew up with a family of artists in the beginning, and I never wanted to carry on doing art because I felt I wanted to do something that had more of an impact. And I was lucky to have the opportunity eventually to get into a university and study sustainable design, which was all about using different products to different materials and different energies to power different products. And it was halfway through the course that I suddenly realized that although it was interesting looking at the different materials, the kind of message that I would be giving following a career like that, and what really the marketing message was around all of the stuff that we were designing, is that it's okay to keep consuming as long as it's got a sustainable sticker on it. And for the first time, I kind of realized where art did have its place. And I realized that for a situation as big as the environmental situation, we really need to, there's a real place for artists and people who influence culture to think really big and to sort of lead the way. So I gave up design and I got into art, I suppose. And let's see if I can share screen here. I'll tell you a bit about our journey. So hopefully you can see the screen. So I partnered up with another guy who was into the same sort of stuff, who was working on, he'd been building big concert structures, and he'd become a bit exhausted seeing all the waste that was going on, and he was getting a bit bored of it. We were doing lots of little parties. We were sort of early 20s, little parties, braves, I guess, in different farmers' fields and having a laugh. And we decided maybe we'd try and build an installation for a festival. So this was our first lorry load of scrap. We didn't really have any money, but as you can see, it was made up of mostly like water butts that were being thrown away at a plastic place that provides water butts. There's a couple of more exciting bits, like there's a jet engine in there. We found them on Army Scrapyard, and a drop tank from an aircraft. We took that to site to Glastonbury Festival and made our first installation, which we called the Afterburner, which is pretty much everything you saw in the last picture is there. And the idea was that we had a space in the middle where a DJ could play music, and seating areas around where lots of people could sit around fires and they could talk and interact. And the idea was that it was a late night chill out area. But come 11 o'clock on the first night, on the Thursday night, we fired up. We had 5,000 people dancing all over it, and the whole thing went pretty mad. And we kind of realised that we were on a slightly different journey than we'd set out to, and quite quickly started building these dance music arenas. Something that had really inspired us as well on this journey by this point, from going to a couple of military scrapyards, is just how much military scrap is thrown away and how incredible the stuff is, and how it's been designed for such destructive purposes, and how exciting it was artistically to take that and repurpose it to build something new. So we specifically head back out to military scrapyards, and we wanted to make a new structure that could suspend performers. We've been working with a lot of aerialists who have been practicing using our cranes, our higher hooks on our cranes, to do performance, and we thought, let's try and build a structure that we can hang people off. So went to a few different army scrapyards. Eventually we found this place, and these 6-wheeled machines at the bottom were used to transport these customs and excise scanning units at the top, and they were going over to border crossings into into Sahara and stuff like that, and scanning containers to see what was inside of them. And the three machines were having the arms taken off so that they could ship just the truck back out for some other military use. So we managed to buy these for not very much at all, and we managed to drag them home, brought them for scrap value. And when we got home, we found out they were full of lead, which was a bit of a winner at that point because we still didn't really have any funding. So we weighed in all the lead, which gave us a chunk of money to build a spider. So the first thing we built was this. We recycled the original stage. We took the DJ booth and we put it on top. We made a live stage underneath, and we had performers hanging from underneath the knuckles. The performers loved it, and the live musicians loved it, and the DJs absolutely hated it. They had to climb up a ladder at the back and across a gantry into the DJ booth, and they kind of didn't have any choice about doing it once the crowd was there waiting for them, but quite a few people fed back to us they weren't going to do that again. So we went back to the drawing board, and we completely redesigned it and came up with this. So as you can see, we dropped the DJ booth underneath so they were closer to the crowd. We actually took the cranes off of our lorries and put the cranes on top of the structure so that you could have the performance on top of it, and it gave it a bit more animation. We found 5 more of the jet engines that we'd used for the original afterburner booth, and we used 1 for each eye. It's got 6 eyes, 3 faces. You can't always tell here, but there's 2 other sides to it. And we mounted these massive great flamethrowers on top, which performance-wise added like a shockwave punch like you wouldn't believe, and just like really just made the stage and the show and everything come to a whole new level. But we were aware at this point that we were using lots of LPG gas, and that wasn't really what we'd set out to do. And we'd been looking at alternatives and trying to find how would we take this thing to the next level, because it was gathering loads of momentum, the crowds were getting bigger, but we were a bit confused about how to go further. And then we had a bit of a breakthrough. We heard Bristol had won European Green Capital Award, and they were looking for people to create performances to celebrate the award. And we went to them and said, look, we'd be really up for doing something in the middle of Bristol. The main thing we need from you is a bit of support to try and figure out what to do about these flames, because we don't want to lose them. So with a bit of help from them and a few very clever engineers and a lot of trial and error, we created a new system that ran off reused vegetable oil. So all these flames you see here is from vegetable oil that's been used in all Bristol's fish and chip shops. We go around and collect it all, get it processed, and make this flame machine on top of the structure. And that was great. That felt like we pushed through to the next level, and we were very excited about taking our shows into the city. And so we did. And at this point, we started to really look at the artistic messaging, like I was saying before. How do you really galvanize what this is about without ramming it down anyone's throat. And so we created a show called Metamorphosis, and Metamorphosis as a theatrical journey was an hour-long show to dance music that you could dance to a bit, but mainly you were watching a spectacular performance unfold. And during this performance, audience members were plucked out the crowd, and they were metamorphosized, if you like, transformed into these beings with superpowers. Some of them had these amazing LED costumes on that we made in collaboration with an artist that just looked like they were this sort of floating insect jellyfish creature. And other ones that got metamorphosized after they got abducted ended up standing on top of Tesla coils and shooting these bolts of lightning from their heads and arms, and making music with all this different electricity. So it's quite a spectacular show, and you could enjoy it just for what it was. But the idea was you could also read into it, of course, which people do with art quite often, and make your own analysis of it. And within that, you could see that it was called Metamorphosis. It was made of recycled materials. It was the flames were being run off Bristol's, reused fish and chip stuff. And there were lots of initiatives around site about general sustainable festival practice. So, and it was a real success. People seemed to really resonate with it. The press seemed to resonate with it. Compared to other environmental shows we'd done before, people seemed to really absorb and enjoy the environmental narrative. There was it never felt preachy at all. We certainly never got that feedback, which worked really well. And within a year, we took it back to Glastonbury, and we had 50,000 people in the field watching the show. So it was kind of an interesting time then. We'd kind of reached a peak. We'd created the show that we'd wanted to create over those years. Surprisingly enough, the biggest environmental footprint that you can see there at Glastonbury by a mile is the amount of usage of petrol and diesel that people have used just to get to the event before they've even started the event. So it made us really realise the difference between taking our shows into city centres versus getting people to drive out to these festivals. And so we knew we wanted to take it to other city centres. And about the same time, we got a lot of opportunities to tour. Different people were coming to us from Asia and Australia and America saying, look, can you get this on the road? And looking back now, I think if we had the same opportunity again, I think we would take it again. I think we learned so much before we even got into this journey from traveling from different cultures, and got so inspired that that's what created this whole momentum. And to take that to other cultures and continue that journey felt really important to us. Taking it to city centres, as I said, seemed to be a real positive compared to what we've been doing before. However, once we were committed and we started working out what it would take to move it, there were 50 crew and 5 shipping containers involved. And although we tried to tour very cleverly from one part of the globe to the next, quite often it was hard to get people to necessarily commit, or the seasons weren't right or whatever. So sometimes we'd end up moving a few countries and then back a few countries, and then it was a bit of a zigzag. So that was a real challenge. We worked with Claire O'Neill, who's going to be on this call later on, and she brought an amazing sort of scientific edge to what we were doing and some ideas of how we could make our touring thing as green as possible. We also, with her, created a thing called a Green Rider, which, as was said before, it was a rider that said, by booking us, we expect you to provide this fee, this equipment in this way, and to conduct your festival in this way. And that seemed to go down really well, especially in some Asian countries, Southeast Asian countries that are known for dumping a lot of plastics in the water and lots of rubbish. And it was amazing to turn up there and see them, because obviously we're turning up with a show and there's celebrity DJs and stuff. They were kind of getting inspired by what the idea was behind the show and the ethic. And so it was really interesting seeing cultures really new to it, suddenly seeing what was deemed as just like rubbish and a subject not to have much light thrown on it, be paying a lot of attention to it. So that was really cool. And sometimes it went totally the other way. There were a couple of gigs where the promoters turned up with like lorry loads of plastic crap to give away to the audience with Arcadia sort of spelt wrongly on the back of it, kind of thing. that was, that was some of the failures, and that was pretty hard to control. But it did at least always bring up this conversation, which was really interesting. And so you can see some of the countries we went to. Hang on. Yeah, you see some of the places we went to over those years with our various shows. And I think the cultural thing for us, the thing that was most important, was one particular show we did, although they were all very interesting culturally. We worked in Perth with an Aboriginal tribe to resurrect an ancient performance that hadn't been seen in public for hundreds of years. And it was about a spider, and it was about a web, and it was about interconnectivity. And it was amazing collaboration, and we learned a hell of a lot from them that will inspire everything we do from now on. And I think they realized as well how they could create these platforms and get their ancient tradition and their ancient knowledge and understanding about the planet and interconnectivity out into modern day culture through collaborating with artists like us or electronic musicians and things like that. So that cross-cultural thing definitely has a lot of power, and I guess I'm saying that because I do think that it's important that internationally artists work together and do work together and find ways of doing that. So yeah, this was us working with the guys and then practicing their performance underneath. So where are we going now? So we've finished that trip. We've taken a bit of an artistic break, but we've had to carry on. We've got a company to keep ticking over. So we've created the foundation for a new wave of Arcadia creatures. And we've managed to convince Michael Eavis to let us put something more permanent in one of his fields. So this is Avonmouth Docks. We found all these amazing bits of equipment there that were being thrown away. And we specifically got really into this crane here, which is a really interesting old bit of equipment. It's been designed to sit by the sea, since the 70s. It's still working absolutely fine. It's got loads of life left in it. So 12 lorries later, we had it at Glastonbury and installed there, where it'll stay for 5 years. And it's got a stage built in at the bottom of it. It's got a big projection screen above it, this big globe, which was another military dish that we found. And for year one, we just went as far as that, installing a new stage at Glastonbury. But the idea is we can now create much more lightweight, tourable creatures that can move, whether like puppets or flying creatures. And we can create them, we can test them, develop them, do these big shows at Glastonbury. And in theory, we can take these abroad, and we can also take stuff from abroad that people are making into the UK without having to ship 5 container loads of infrastructure, because we're using local cranes and local things as much as we can. It's got a permanent DJ booth in it, so the DJ side of things is slightly separate to the main thing, and people can gather around that. And still going with the different flame sources around the edge. And this is an example of the one thing we did fly last year, or the year before last, was Luke Jerram's Moon, just to try it out and see what it was like hosting stuff above the audience. And so I guess where we're going now is a much more collaborative approach to try and export not necessarily all the equipment, but a lot of the ideas and infrastructure. So we might export some things that are much more lightweight, perhaps going down the route of inflatables and various different ways of making things. But we want to really try and condense our, formulate what we're doing and condense our knowledge as best as we can into quite well packaged kind of toolkits, if you like, and be able to go into different cultures, either recycle stuff that's there or use existing cranes and things that you can hire in that country, take a minimal crew of our own with all of our expertise, all very well packaged, and start training local crew how to start creating essentially their own shows, but still with the sort of flavour of what Arcadia has developed over the years.
Thank you. Thanks, Pip. That's brilliant. Sorry to jump in. I'm being nudged about time.
No worries.
Just to say, so Pip will be available for follow-up discussion after this session, and he'll also be joined by Claire O'Neill, who mentioned in his presentation, to answer any of the questions. You can post your questions in the stage section of the chat there, and they'll get picked up at 2 o'clock when we start that. Claire, just to remind, is the Sustainability Manager for Arcadia and the co-founder and director of A Greener Festival. So it would be interesting to get Claire's insights later. Pip, I don't know if you could stop sharing your screen there, and then we should be able to hear from Pete. So Pete Gunson is co-artistic director of Piff Paff Theatre. Pete founded Piff Paff in 2003, and the company works across visual and physical theatre, circus, sculpture, engineering, and live and specially commissioned music. Pete, I'll let you take over from now. Sorry, we're running a little bit late. Over to you.
Hello, hiya. I'm Pete, and I thought it'd be fun to do this from our workshop. So this is our workshop, which I'll talk about in a minute. I'm going to talk about Toast, not so much about the show itself, more about the set. But the idea of the show is to build small communities and engage people with various cultures around the country, which aren't maybe celebrated as much as we think they could be. So in terms of sustainability, it's about building community, building engagement with the environment around us, and then leading on to sort of the planet as the goal, if that makes any sense. So my talk is about practical notes, and at a much smaller scale than Pip's. We started to look more and more at circular economy, which I know has been talked about quite a lot today, and getting quite a lot of stuff off the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which I found really useful to think and sort of frame our thinking. Now, the setup of our company allows us to sort of stick to our principles of making sustainable work. And one of those is having a workshop where we can store materials, because that's mainly what we talk about, the physical set, which we spend a lot of time on. And around us in the workshop, we can see there's lots of filing cabinets, shelves, racks. There's a roof up there and the set behind us. And what this means is that whenever we buy a material or find something we think will be useful, we can sort of use it and make it smaller and smaller through a progression of shows until we finally send it off to the designated recycling. And there's a whole row behind me there of all the different bins which go to the recycling centre. I suppose that's the thing, storage allows you to hold on to materials, which allows you to reuse them. And that's the crux of it all. And because we make our sets, and I and Eleanor lead on all of the sets, we can have a really tight control on that, which isn't always the case. And we can always make the decisions for sustainability. Now, the company is not just us. We hire people to come in and make, and we try to hire activists sort of out of the same sort of activist background we came out of into this. And what that does is, A, we support them in their activist work, and B, it means that any conversation we want to have about the complex decisions of how much time and money to spend making something with reclaimed materials, because it does always take more time, they're already really advanced in that. So I think a core of people who are already on that journey makes this possible. And another small note about equipment: you need lots of equipment, but we have a really good network around us. So often one of us will buy one piece of equipment, one sort of saw, and someone else will buy another. And it just means that we're sharing stuff, less purchasing, less consumption, and more community and support, which is really important. So the design process that is sort of exemplified here with Toast. So Toast is a 3-person show on this electric cart. It's got a kitchen, a full sort of sound setup. It's got electric motors to drive. I feel like a weatherman. Electric motors to drive it in the space. It's got a little podium here, so a performer sticks his head out the top through an umbrella up there, and we cook pancakes, share food, and sing songs. So starting at one end of the set, I'm going to talk about our process and move to the other. Before that, just want to talk about prototyping, which is a real circular economy bedstone. The show Toast has taken 3 years to develop. We've created 3 versions of this set, often sort of cobbled together and then elements chopped up and reused. And that allows us not to invest loads of resources and materials in something that we're not going to use. So prototyping and test shows in front of audiences are really important. I guess like Pip was talking, the journey of the show, it doesn't arrive fully born. Repairability is a really big thing. Because we make the show from scratch, I'll go into it a bit more, we're really reducing what we throw away because we can keep stuff on the road. And a lot of our work goes from, a lot of the equipment we have goes from show to show to show. So it'll have a 15-year lifespan. A thing about reclaimed materials is you can quite often find it defining your aesthetic. So it's good to be clear about that, I feel. That can be a good thing, or sometimes we get really frustrated and want to get rid of that aesthetic of just reuse things. But there's always a way, I think, especially at scale, to find materials that have already been used once and find a way to make them look pristine. I think that's really important to agree that that's sort of a challenge you face. So the build, we're going to start at one end, going to do a little wander around. There's a drum kit over here, which musical instruments, eminently reusable. Some of the pots and pans are made out of helium cylinders, which I know a lot of us like to chop up gas bottles, but that's actually taking things away from a circular economy, whereas helium cylinders don't get reclaimed, and you can find them behind skips in pub car parks, and much lighter in terms of moving materials around. So bits of metal, helium cylinders, and we based our colour plan for the whole show around this helium cylinder. Moving forward slightly, the wheels here and the electric motors underneath come from a electric wheelchair place. So they sell them, but they also service electric wheelchairs, built up a relationship with them. And we sort of take stuff out that was going to go to scrap, going to go to landfill, and you can get really top quality gear from there. And the wheels, these are rolled steel, but there's tires on them which come from there's a cycle refurbishing company. And I think a lot of places will have, a lot of cities have got cycle projects. In these cycle projects, they're gathering together good old kit and are dying for people to buy it. It's much cheaper than eBay, I can tell you that, for really good quality old cycle parts. We've made, you won't be able to see, but there's a little remote control out of cycle brake levers for the for a Boss RC30 loop pedal, which is a great piece of sound kit, again bought off eBay. So just about eBay, I think we get a lot of stuff off there, and like the speakers we've got, super high quality speakers. They're going to last for 20 years. They're already probably third or fourth hand, and they're a fifth of their sort of original price. So buying second hand is not a compromise. It's often a benefit across all the levels. And Facebook Marketplace, we found, is really good if you need a quick turnaround and to find something local in that sound equipment sort of world. So the whole structure is made out of metal, and a lot of that is new metal. And I'm kidding myself that it's really environmentally friendly. I don't know, I know there'll be some science on this. It will get reused, but as Mark was saying earlier, that's the recycling economy, and there's a lot of energy used there. So that's something we could probably improve on. The timber on the set is all reused. That bit there is out of my granddad's shed 10 years ago. Old plywood, if you can get hold of it, is much better quality than anything you'll buy these days. It was probably sourced much worse, but by keeping these materials going, if you've got room to store big sheets that you get hold of, then you can really make an environmental benefit there. There is communitywoodrecycling.org.uk is, I just checked earlier, it's a umbrella organisation. So there's about 20 local community wood recycling places there. So that's a great resource, which leads me on to scrap stores, which quite a lot of cities have, where, again, industrial offcuts, industrial waste is collected, and you can go there and pick up useful bits for making set and props. And also, they take things to spread to play resources. So if we've got spare paint or fabric or materials or great bits of set, which we can see are quite useful, we've seen them in use at adventure playgrounds and at play centres after we've taken them to the scrap store. So that's a good thing. And scrap stores are at reusefuluk.org. Again, there's a national register of scrap stores to get your reclaimed materials. So that's the timber. The sound system, this isn't going to make a big difference, but I think it's like the meditation of having the intention to use environmentally better products. This is an amplifier, 12-volt amplifier, and this is another 12-volt amplifier, which is 3 times as big, and it's got none of the packaging, none of the crap, basically, all these knobs you don't need. So I'm trying to get more into buying products like this off eBay again, with none of your collateral plastic. And if something breaks, you can see it and repair it, and you can replace if needs be. So I'm thinking about using smaller and smaller elements, as it were. So on that subject, again, if you're touring your own shows, a really good piece of equipment to get into for repairing and keeping stuff on the road is your multimeter and your soldering iron. I think I'd really advocate spending time getting someone to show you how to use this equipment. If you're touring, as we do, small, sort of technically ambitious sets, you can make, once you got going with your soldering iron, you can make little Frankenstein sound cables. So those cables that break, which is quite common, you put them in a box, and then when you need another cable, you can solder them up, a little bit of heat shrink there. And it's helping a bit, and it's really satisfying, and it makes you sort of more capable as a maker. On the subject, Mark was talking earlier about scaffolding. I just wanted to share a thought about that. Is scaffolding, you hire it in, but you can have a big bucket of clips in your workshop for prototyping shapes or structures, or how big that's going to look. I'd really advocate working with scaffolding, because you hire it, it goes back to the hirer, it's really cheap and it's really strong, and you can run around on it, you can do circus stuff on it. So there's a little thought there. I just wanted to share that. So back to the set. As you work up the set, there's lots of pots and pans in the show. There's a charity shop called Emmaus, E-M-M-A-U-S, which is a national organisation, and it's like a Costco charity shop. And they're often a bit out of town. You go there with a van, they've got warehouses, and you can get a load of good recycled stuff there. And again, the useful things you have in your workshop and think, I don't want to store that, Emmaus will take things which a normal charity shop wouldn't. Going further up, there's the canvas, which unfortunately we did have to buy, well, we chose to buy new, but we prototyped that with canvas from a show which we built sort of 10 years ago. So there's a thing about, in all of our sets, as materials go from show to show to show, so that canvas, I know, will be living with us for a long time. So I talked about the sound system. Oh yeah, the control system for the cart. So this whole cart moves around with these, as I said, these old electric wheelchair motors. They're controlled by a little device called an Arduino, which is a microprocessor, about half the size of that. And I know this is buying new electronics, but one of these chips you can reuse and repurpose to control lights, sounds, motor control, MIDI, and other effects. So it's sort of buying a multi-purpose piece of equipment there, then and there. I think I've covered it, actually. I'm going to say I've talked about the set. I'm going to pass back to Mark. If there's any questions about the set, please do fire them in later. But I think we're running a bit late, so I thought we could wrap it up there. But whilst we're waiting, just one more thing to say. Electrics. There's tools that you can buy to help you reuse electric wire to make things, to make new objects. And one of those is this Wago. It's worth getting a box of these if you do want to make your sets. It's a little connector, but there's little devices. I know it's buying new things, but it allows you to reuse so many items that I would advise having a look at those. Thank you very much. I think Mark's struggling to get back in, so he's definitely stuck outside. He's coming back in. He's there.
Let me back in. Thank you. Pete, that was brilliant. Really useful to see real life. So we're gonna end the session just here. But Pete, myself, Pip, and Claire will be back. We're going to give ourselves a 10-minute break, so probably 2:05 we'll all be back. Any questions into the stage section? Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you shortly.